I didn't raise my voice when the HOA president waved that violation letter in my face, accusing me of unauthorized debris removal. I just slid the federal disaster order across the table and waited. Their lawyer's smirk froze first, then drained away completely. The stamped seal of FEMA, the signatures from County Emergency Management, and the bold black letters authorizing my cleanup efforts were all right there. For once, the entire board sat in silence. I wasn't just some neighbor to be bullied anymore. I was the person holding the one piece of paper that stripped their authority down to nothing. I hadn't moved here to fight anybody. The property was supposed to be my refuge. After 2 decades of working long shifts in the city, I wanted something quieter, cleaner, more human. The little house I bought wasn't anything grand, but it sat on the edge of tall woods with a creek that ran across the back lot. There was space for a small garden, a workshop in the garage, and the kind of silence you could actually hear. I spent my evenings on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to crickets instead of traffic. That was my idea of wealth. Not more money, but fewer interruptions. The HOA was technically part of the subdivision, but I barely noticed them at first. They were supposed to maintain the front gate, mow the common lawn, and organize potlucks. I wasn't trying to make friends or start drama. I just wanted peace. It was after the storm that they started sniffing around. That summer, a brutal system rolled through. Straight-line winds strong enough to uproot trees, flood the creek, and scatter shingles and branches across half the neighborhood. My own yard was buried in limbs and splintered trunks. The county declared the whole region part of a disaster area, and federal relief orders came down almost immediately. Contractors were tied up, so I borrowed a chainsaw from a friend and spent days clearing the mess, hauling branches, and cutting fallen timber just to make the place livable again. The smell of fresh pine and wet soil lingered for weeks. I thought I was doing my part. Not just for myself, but for safety. Then one morning, I walked outside to find a neon notice taped to my garage. Violation. Unauthorized alteration of common grounds and removal of natural vegetation. At first, I laughed. I honestly thought it was some kind of clerical mistake. There were trees smashed against my fence, and the HOA was accusing me of unauthorized vegetation removal. I called the number on the notice and asked politely what exactly I was supposed to do. Leave the downed oaks rotting across my driveway. The woman on the other end didn't laugh. She told me sternly that all landscaping and debris management required board approval, even after storms, and that I could be fined for altering the neighborhood's natural appearance without consent. I hung up in disbelief. That was my first taste of their nonsense, and I should have known it wouldn't be the last. Still, I tried to be civil. I emailed the board with photos of the damage, linked the county's disaster declaration, and even cited the section of the HOA bylaws that exempted emergency safety work from I asked for a meeting to clarify what they expected from me. Weeks passed with no response until another letter arrived in the mail. This one threatening daily fines if I didn't restore the property to HOA approved condition. Restore it to what? To the state of wreckage after the storm. The sarcasm practically wrote itself. I knocked on neighbors' doors, hoping for some solidarity, but most gave me tight smiles and muttered excuses. A few whispered that they'd gotten similar threats, but didn't want trouble. That's when I realized the HOA's game wasn't about rules. It was about power. And intimidation worked best when people stayed quiet. That was the night I stopped sending friendly emails and started digging into the law. I requested copies of the original subdivision plat and pulled up county zoning codes. I spent late evenings reading the fine print on federal disaster relief statutes, especially the Stafford Act, which lays out how property owners can respond during declared emergencies. I kept every letter, every voicemail, every photograph of storm damage neatly filed. My garage slowly turned into a war room. Binders of statutes, folders of correspondence, and a wall calendar marking every time they tried to escalate fines. My family hated it. My wife admitted she felt anxious every time she saw an HOA envelope in the mailbox. My son stopped riding his bike around the neighborhood after one of the board members snapped at him for leaving it in the driveway. I couldn't sleep some nights, not from anger, but from focus. My mind locked on finding the lever I could use to pry the HOA's grip off my life. The lever finally appeared in an overlooked detail. Federal Disaster Orders Dante, just override local ordinances. They also nullify HOA restrictions when cleanup is tied to safety and habitability. The county emergency office had filed an order explicitly authorizing debris removal on private lots within our area. I obtained a certified copy directly from the records department, complete with signatures and a raised seal. In black and white, it stated that homeowners were required, not just permitted, to clear hazardous debris. The HOA wasn't just wrong, they were actively interfering with a federal mandate. I nearly laughed out loud when I read it. All the fines, all the threats, all the pompous notices. Every one of them was legally void. So when the board called me to a disciplinary hearing, I didn't bring a lawyer or even raise my voice. I just walked in with a folder under my arm and sat quietly as they rattled off my supposed violations. They accused me of damaging common property, altering neighborhood character, and refusing to comply with HOA regulations. I let them finish, then slid the disaster order across the table without a word. Their lawyer picked it up, started reading, and you could see the blood drain out of his face. He knew what it meant before anyone else did. The president. As tirade sputtered out mid-sentence as she tried to grasp that the very cleanup they were punishing me for was federally required. By the time I spoke, my tone was calm, almost bored. "Every fine you've issued," I said, tapping the document, "is unenforceable. You're in violation of federal and county law. I suggest you withdraw them immediately." The aftermath was as satisfying as it was quiet. The HOA rescinded all my fines within 2 weeks. But the damage to their authority went further. Word spread among the neighbors that the board had tried to penalize storm cleanup against a federal mandate. People started attending meetings, asking harder questions, and citing my case as precedent. Within 6 months, 2 board members resigned. The president herself stepped down after a recall petition gained traction. The new leadership is quieter, more cautious, and suddenly very interested in following their own bylaws to the letter. My neighbors, once nervous to even talk to me, now stop to chat by the mailbox or nod respectfully as I drive past. Some wave, some look away. Either way, it's peace. As for me, I went back to my quiet life. The woods are still scarred from that storm. But the garden's thriving, the creek runs clear, and my porch has become my favorite courtroom. A place where I can sip coffee in the evening and reflect on the strange comedy of power. The HOA thought they could scare me into submission over a few fallen trees. Instead, they taught me just how flimsy their control really was when held up against the weight of actual law. Now, when I see their new notices posted on the bulletin board, I don't feel anger anymore. Just amusement, because I know one thing. LL never admit out loud. The loudest voice in the room means nothing if the quietest person has the law on their side.